So, you find yourself on the UnrealEntGaming channel. How fortunate for you. I, Lord Frieza, will spare your life as long as you subscribe and turn on notifications. Also, don't forget to become a member of UnrealEntGaming's Patreon for tons of exclusive content to early access media and much more. Do it now, or else.
March 25th, 2018 has now officially marked 6 years and 7 months since the last time we've seen a Dragon Ball anime product air worldwide, with Dragon Ball Super Episode 131 having to conclude the events of the Tournament of Power, and now 6 years and 7 months later, we now officially have the debut of Dragon Ball Daima. But what makes this different by comparison to what happened 6 years ago was, unfortunately enough, the creator of Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama, is no longer with us, but his everlasting memory and his legacy will always continue to carry on in having to leave behind one of his final projects, with that having to be Dragon Ball Daima, as I do want to welcome you all to my Dragon Ball Daima anime episode number 1 official review, as right off the gate from the very beginning I deliberately went as far as to hold back any comments that I had ever since the initial announcement of Dragon Ball Daima, and that was mainly because I was never really a fan of the overall concept behind Daima and what Daima was going to introduce, especially with its overall premise. But going into this series, beginning with episode 1 with my bias aside, since of course I wanted to see Dragon Ball Super return, I wanted to see Moro be adapted just like everyone else wanted to see, I really wanted to go into Dragon Ball Daima by having to remove my bias and keep an open mind, and man, from the very beginning what I will say is that I think it's pretty obvious by now that Dragon Ball Daima looks beautiful. From a visual standpoint, having to put the narrative aside for a second, whenever Shueisha and Toei Animation finally decide to get their act together and start to animate the Moro arc and then the Granolah arc, and then hopefully we move past superhero and then move into something new after the fact, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm really hoping that it looks something similar to Daima, because for many years Dragon Ball Super had caught strays left and right for its visual aesthetics and the way it looked, and I think that a lot of us can agree that Dragon Ball Super had its ups, had its downs, but this was actually pretty good, because in my opinion I think Dragon Ball Super Superhero looked like absolute trash. The CGI was atrocious, to me at least. Dragon Ball Super Broly visually had looked the best up until this very point in time, and I think that with the way they went as far as to introduce how Daima looks, I think that's a big plus moving forward for Dragon Ball, because I really don't think that anyone wants to see Super return specifically by seeing Moro fight Goku or anything of the sorts, and just have the visual aesthetics and the animation look like cheap knockoffs compared to what we've seen here in Dragon Ball Daima. So from the very beginning, as we venture on over into the Demon Realm and having to be introduced to a Kaioshin named Degesu and of course a little demon by the name of Goma, they just so happen to have had these giant screens that were displaying all of the events that follow through the Majin Buu arc, which I will say really went as far as to surprise me, because even though I'm not a fan of the overall premise of having all of this seemingly take place before Battle of Gods, so for them to go all the way back during the events and having to relive the Majin Buu story looked so glorious, especially when having to see Goku versus Majin Vegeta, Majin Buu having to hatch and going up against our heroes, having to see Super Buu fight against our heroes, Majin Vegeta's explosion against Buu, the entirety of the events that led up to Super Buu, Kid Buu, it all looked so good that it almost kind of infuriates me in a way, because the visuals looked so amazing that it almost makes me question as to what the heck happened with Superhero. And even throughout most of Dragon Ball Super's run, with the exception of the latter portions of the Tournament of Power arc, do I only question as to what happened with the anime staff, because realistically speaking, with the exception of Dragon Ball Super Broly, this was probably the best that I've seen Dragon Ball look in decades, and to see this little character by the name of Goma actually be so fascinated by Deborah's death kind of made me wonder as to why that was, until we finally had the revelation that of course Goma wants to become the new Demon King of course the Demon Realm. But there was a bit of a problem, only because this little character that goes by the name of Goma really wasn't seeming seemingly taken serious by half of the characters that he was around, which almost makes me kind of wonder if this is really gonna be the main villain, because although Degesu, which again kind of reminds me a lot of Zamasu in a way, almost kind of makes me feel like he's the real villain of the story just based on his overall demeanor and just based on his overall body language, his approach. He seemed more like a villain than Goma was, because Goma simply wants to go as far as to avenge Deborah's death, of course, by questioning the events of what happened with all of the Saiyans involved and even Majin Buu. So inevitably enough, they end up going to Earth, and interestingly enough, it's Trunks' birthday. So upon us having to see everybody once again feast, because they always gotta start off some kind of a story by having everybody eat, right? It really wasn't long after until Goku decided to stand up and challenge Vegeta to a fight, which again, even in the present, their fight looked absolutely amazing. But if we're being totally objective and honest here, nothing throughout this episode really happened outside of a bunch of recaps, which again looked really good. So unless you're some kind of a casual, there was really nothing new in this episode that we didn't already know of, aside from having to see Goma travel from point A to point B, going inside of this weird gigantic fish, linking up with some very old and weird looking evil Namekian, mind you, who disgustingly enough reminds me so much of Monaito, and I hated Monaito so much in the Granolah arc only because he was so useless. But what I will say is I actually liked this older evil Namekian in this particular episode, because when they all ended up coming to Earth, it was Dende that ended up confronting this Namekian, and interestingly enough, this Namekian kind of used a bit of wordplay to get the Dragon Balls away from Dende's possession, and it was only shortly after, with Dende attempting to interfere by stopping them from using the Dragon Balls, was where we actually got to see one of the biggest highlights, at least for me, and that was when this evil Kaioshin Degesu used one of Zamasu's chops to chop Dende in the neck, because it was so unexpected, it was so funny, and it was so random to see him do that, but it inevitably ended up working in their favor, because upon them having to summon Shenron, that's when all of the interesting things happened, right? Which again, mind you, everyone's attending Trunks' birthday, really nobody's paying attention as to what is going on, until that was when Goma had weirdly enough decided to turn everyone into children. Now this was something that I think a lot of us had a problem with, because we didn't really want to see this quote GT 2.0, right? Because we've been there, done that, and if we really want to watch peak Goku as a child, then I think it's safe to say we would all much rather watch OG Dragon Ball than anything else, right? So our heroes get turned into children essentially by the end of the episode, and that's when the episode cut off. And I think that for what it's worth, again, visually, based on the overall soundtrack from the beginning, everything flowed so smoothly, except, again, I can't stress it enough, the narrative, because if this was somewhat after the events of maybe Granolah, Superhero, then okay, but to go all the way back pre-Battle of Gods is just a little weird. Unless they plan on having to take this into Super later on, then I do believe that this could be somewhat of an exception. The episode was fun, the episode was very nostalgic in a way, if you had to use that term, to go back and relive the events of the Majin Buu story, except once again, it all looked so beautiful that I really do hope that whenever they decide to bring back Moro, Granolah, etc. for Super, that they essentially end up using whatever team this was to animate this and make this look as beautiful as possible, because I was simply blown away, because I wasn't expecting this much detail to go into literally anything, especially recaps, right? So if these were all just recaps and retellings of the events of Dragon Ball Z, then you can only imagine as to what they have lined up for Daima in the foreseeable future, which is a good thing. So the Demon Realm looked amazing, the overall fluidity of everything looked amazing, and everything so far looked really good. Good episode, entertaining episode, a very nostalgic episode. And so what did it for me was feeling this overall sense of the episode feeling kind of a bit short, even though it wasn't, because I wanted to see more. But nonetheless, I think for me, for the debut of Dragon Ball Daima, it was solid. I think the recaps were a bit much, even though they all looked visually amazing. They could have dived down on that a little bit and show us a bit more of the Demon Realm instead, which I have no doubt, of course, that we will see more as the show ends up continuing. But one of the more bigger questions, at least for me, was where was Gohan? I don't think we've seen Gohan anywhere throughout that event, anywhere throughout that party, which almost makes me kind of wonder as to where he was, you know? Because you can't really rule out anything with Beerus and Whis, because again, pre-Battle of Gods, so where the heck is Gohan, right? So we didn't really see them. We saw Kibito and Shin defused, actually, which, again, was a really cool moment to see, especially when Goku went as far as to call him out by saying, hey, didn't you guys once say that once you guys put those Patara earrings on that you're gonna stay merged forever, right? And that is, of course, because we've seen them fused within the moments where Battle of Gods begins and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But when having to go back early on into the episode, we actually got to see another character that went by the name of Glorio secretly spy and kind of eavesdrop in listening on Goma's conversation, which I'm not even gonna lie to you guys here, Glorio reminds me so much of Mira from Dragon Ball Xenoverse, from Dragon Ball Online, and so every time I personally see him, whether that's in a trailer or a promotional material, all I keep thinking is Mira and not really Glorio, you know? So once you guys end up seeing him and you really start looking at him, only then are you gonna just start seeing Mira all over the place, which again, I think they could have created a bit more of a different design instead of having to have someone kind of look like Mira, but to my understanding, we really didn't see anything from a female demon character by the name of Pansy, or at least I'm assuming she's a demon, but I think she's about to be introduced relatively soon, perhaps maybe during episode 2 or episode 3 here. So when looking at everything as a whole, I think that there is potential here. Again, I think that the overall timeline placement here is a bit wonky, but I want to kind of give it a chance to see where they go from here. So even now, by the very end, I want to go ahead and get your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below and getting a better idea of what you guys thought about Dragon Ball Daima, because even though I went on to refrain from making any sort of video or give out any sort of comments about my thoughts on Daima early on upon its initial announcement, because I really wasn't sure about what to expect, and what I will say is that after viewing Dragon Ball Daima episode 1, I do truly wish that Dragon Ball Daima came out before Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods back during 2012, 2013, because I really do think that this would have fit the overall narrative better in having to introduce this before having to introduce the gods, Golden, Frieza, you know, things of that nature. And so that, of course, was then. We can't change the past, we can only move forward and move on into the future. And so I do want to say rest in peace to the absolute GOAT himself, Akira Toriyama. It's really honestly painful to know that he's no longer here with us, but this was in fact the final works that he had lined up for us before his unfortunate passing. So with all of the memories that he had left behind for us to all enjoy and grow from children into adults, and then from adults and having to guide our children and getting them into Dragon Ball Daima episode 1 to me was a really enjoyable and fun episode. So again, thank you, Mr. Akira Toriyama, for everything you've done, not just for myself, but for everybody listening and for all those all throughout the world that have been fans and are fans of Dragon Ball. So again, rest in peace to the absolute GOAT of all mangaka himself, Akira Toriyama. Let me know what you all think down in the comment section below about episode 1 if you've seen it. As once again, I want to thank you all so much for watching, everybody. If you guys are new to the channel, then I do encourage for you guys to head on over and smash that subscribe button, on top of giving this video a big fat thumbs up by smashing that like button down below. Tune back in for more. As always, thank you all so much for your time, and I'll be seeing each and every single one of you down in the comment section below and in the next video. Take it easy, guys, and have a great day. Peace.
Hello. Did you know that you can stay up to date with the latest Dragon Ball content by simply subscribing to UnrealEntGaming?
Also, don't forget to follow on these social media platforms, you sexy son of a bitch.
Roshi.
Silent Cell, me and the fans are having a moment. That's right. I know what you want. Extra long, thick Dragon Ball content. Quality reviews with flawless editing. Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you? You dirty bitch.
Roshi, the fuck?
God damn it, I need them to subscribe, Cell.
And we're demonetized.
Yeah, screw it. Let's cut to the video.